Greetings, greenhouse people. We are back with another episode of Tech on Demand brought to you by Grower Talks Magazine. Our goal, as always, is to help you grow your best crops ever, and that's why I'm here with my friend Steve Larson from Envu. During his more than 45 years in turf and ornamental, Steve has worked as a grower and in various roles in technical sales, marketing, technical support. He's done just about everything in the green industry. He's worked in container nursery production, greenhouse crop production, and a variety of technical roles for a list of companies, iconic industry companies, Heinz Nurseries, Scott's, BASF, and Envu. Currently, Steve is the greenhouse and nursery sales specialist for Envu, covering the central U.S. He's based in Katy, Texas, a suburb of Houston, and earned his bachelor's and master of science degrees in horticulture from Purdue. Steve, I really appreciate you taking the time today to chat about something that just about every greenhouse owner and manager deals with each year, but a topic that probably doesn't get the press it deserves. I mean, maybe it's not as exciting as new varieties or pests or diseases, but when it comes to saving money and securing the crop protection products needed for a successful season, it's a pretty critical topic, and I'm talking about early order programs. I mean, they can be as exciting as new varieties, right, Steve?
Well, we try to make it as exciting as new varieties or maybe a new chemical that we've come out with. But I understand for most growers, early order programs can sometimes be just sort of a necessary evil. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping to dissuade that thought a little bit today. I want to say right off the bat here, thank you, Bill, for hosting this topic. You know, this is a topic that I think can really be of benefit to growers if they're purposeful and thoughtful about how they go about the early order program. And it's not just chemicals, you know, it's sort of the buying season for a lot of growers. I think there's probably other products that they may be purchasing during, you know, various distributor shows or different offerings from different companies. And so hopefully I can provide a little bit of sage advice. As you mentioned, I've been doing this a few years. Yep. And so I tell people I'm really not that smart. I'm just old. And because I've been around a while and I've got a reasonably good memory, I like to share some of the things I've learned along the way. So thank you and Grower Talks for hosting this. I'm believe it or not, I'm actually excited to talk about it.
Awesome. And I think you make a good point that even if, you know, we can think about early order and distributor shows and all these different reasons to place these orders and get things locked in as you're talking specifically about crop protection chemicals. I think there's a lot that can go across multiple different product lines. And I think that's a really good point. But before we get started on that, I want to take a quick advantage of getting a chance to talk to you because you work with a lot of growers and you have really good perspective on things. So what are you seeing and hearing out in the field related to mums or poinsettias or anything that's, I mean, we're speaking real time. I think it's week 33. There's a lot going on in greenhouses and in the field. Are you seeing anything out of the ordinary, or is it kind of a normal year for most of the growers you work with producing fall and holiday crops?
Well, I think there's good news to be said along that front, and that's, I'm not hearing much.
Good.
You know, I don't hear a lot of problems that are out there, widespread problems. I think we heard a report. Our technical manager, Dr. Janet Beckerman, who you know well, reported a poinsettia scab outbreak at a single location. I don't think it was related to anything other than the fact that maybe the grower was some cultural related issues. So the good news is I'm not hearing a whole lot. You know, for us in my geography, and so I'm selfish in that I sort of focus on the South Central U.S., which is my territory. As you mentioned, I live in the Houston area, but I reach all the way over to Alabama to New Mexico, and believe it or not, as far north as North Dakota.
Oh, wow.
Down through Colorado. So I've kind of got that a big inverted, well, really just a pyramid of a territory here in the South Central part of the U.S. We've really had very normal weather. In fact, I would say pretty ideal growing weather this year. So that bodes well for the garden mom folks. Good. You know, I do live in Texas. It is hot in June, July, and August, but it hasn't been abnormally hot this year. So that's one good thing. The other thing is we've had really not only just adequate rainfall, but very timely rainfall this year. Right. So not an overly amount, but it's come as it's needed. I would say, if anything, at least with regards to garden mums, I've seen maybe a little bit of nutrient deficiency, but that's probably due to the rainfall that we've had. It's
Yeah.
just washing nutrients out of the pot. So that's usually a pretty easy cure for most growers. So on that front, things are going well. Poinsettia is sort of just getting started. Most of them are probably potted up by now. And so we'll see what the rest of the summer brings, especially August. August and poinsettias are a challenge for us here in the South. But growers, I tell you what growers are doing more and more of, Bill, that I see is they're being much more proactive about their plant health activities. And so they're being proactive, not reactive. And I think what that is doing is that we're hearing less and less of widespread issues because of the fact that they're putting out preventative treatments or they're following a schedule, a program. They're listening to the wisdom of Bill Calkins in his podcast. They're reading your Tech on Demand weekly newsletter, which I read every single week, by the way. I really love it. You reference really good sources. So Grower Talks and Tech on Demand, hey, growers, if you're not taking advantage of it, you need to be because it's great information and it will save you from getting yourself into some problems. So you see how I worked all that in nicely?
I love that. That was an awesome pitch.
Yeah, I worked on it. But I think the bottom line is that we're just not seeing and hearing a lot, and that's not a bad thing.
No, not at all. Not at all. And actually, speaking of being proactive, that gives me a really good segue into our topic at hand today, early order programs. I think with so many crop protection companies publishing EOPs and the strategy is really widespread in the industry, there's got to be history that led us to where we are now with EOPs. So how did this all start? When did it start? And I think it just provides a little bit of context around why we're going to talk about EOPs today.
I'm happy to give a little context to that, and I'm glad you asked the question because if I were a grower and I was confronted with all of these programs, I'd think, why in the world am I trying to buy stuff out of season? Why the fall necessarily? Yeah. We ask a lot of growers. We ask growers to be electricians and plumbers, and we ask them to be HR psychiatrists. We ask a lot of growers. We ask them to be horticulturists every once in a while. But one of the things we ask them to do this time of the year is to be a purchasing agent. And so they have to sort through these programs. And so let me just give you a little history. As you mentioned, I've been doing this for a number of years. Earlier in my career, I worked on the golf side of the business. A lot of the chemistries that are used today in ornamental horticulture are also used the same, if not the same molecules, the same brands actually are used in the golf business and in the lawn care business. And if you look at the history of early order programs, it really started there with golf courses. Golf course superintendents, those are the guys and gals that are taking care or maintaining the agronomics of a golf course. They operate on budgets that are issued to them by the membership of the respective clubs that they work for. And those budgets are usually based on a calendar year, January 1st through December 31st. And if they don't spend the money that are in their budgets, come the following year, typically those budgets will get reduced.
Right.
The membership will say, well, you didn't spend it, you must not need it. And so the superintendents sort of have this use it or lose it mentality. They need to spend money towards the end of the year if they happen to have excess dollars in their budget. Well, somebody out there caught wind of that and said, well, why don't we just make an offering in the fall, give the superintendents an opportunity to make a purchase with what perhaps might be some of the remaining budget. Everybody wins. They get a deal from us. We'll give them some incentives to purchase, and everyone will be happy. Well, a seed of that began to grow. I'll go back as far as 50 or 60 years ago into what it is today, and it's become very widespread. There's just an appetite for purchasing in the fall now that's been sort of developed and massaged into existence over the years. The chemical companies, fertilizer companies, maybe some others thought that was such a great thing. Let's offer that to the lawn care guys because that's another big segment in our turf and ornamentals industry. And again, the whole idea of early order programs was quite successful. In fact, the lawn care guys usually have an opportunity to buy then and actually use it in the fall, as well as maybe carry over some of that inventory to use in the spring. Now, the big difference between lawn care operators and golf course superintendents, Bill, and I think it's pertinent to this conversation, is that lawn care operators tend to be sole proprietorships. They're the owners of the business. This is their money. And so consequently, they may have a little bit different reason than the golf course superintendent who's really spending the club's money or the membership's money. And so the superintendents are just looking to get maybe a discount on products, stretch their budgets a little further. Lawn care people want to get a deal as well, but also payment terms started to come into the early order programs because the lawn care operators are not only trying to get discounts and savings, but they're also trying to manage cash flow. And so, the rationale might be a little different for the early order programs, but you notice now that a lot of these programs also have extended payment terms associated with them. And you'll probably, make the logical thought here is that growers are a lot like lawn care operators.
Yes.
It's their money that they're spending. And so what we're trying to do with these early order programs is just trying to provide them with good financial opportunities so that they can budget and utilize the resources that they have. Let me add one other thing before we go forward, Bill. I want to make a distinction in the products that we sell and a little bit of some definitions. One's agency products and one's non-agency products. Those are essentially how we offer our products at Envu and most of the other manufacturers. An agency product is where the manufacturer establishes the price of a product in the marketplace. In a sense, it's a transaction legally, actually, it's a transaction between me, the manufacturer, and the end user, which would be the grower in this instance. Right. The distributor is acting as an agent. They're facilitating the sale. What they're doing is they provide inventory in a warehouse. They got warehouses all over the U.S., the various distributors. They have sales reps that have relationships with the growers. They happen to have the opportunity to collect the money. And so they're doing a number of the transactional portion of the business for us. And in exchange for that, we as manufacturers pay them agents an agency commission. So they don't own the product that's in their warehouse. We actually put it in there on consignment. And the reason I tell you all of this, it's kind of gobbledygook, but agency price products give us as manufacturers an opportunity to do things with the early order programs that are really beneficial to growers. For example, we can discount the price on the front end. We can offer rebate on the product. We have a lot more flexibility with those kinds of things. But maybe most importantly, we can offer extended payment terms. And in some instances, extremely long and extended payment terms. All of those things we're able to do because we, the manufacturer, own the product of these, so to speak, agency products. Now, that doesn't mean that we exclude non-agency products. There's lots of those that we sell in our portfolio, and we can include those in the programs. We might be a little bit more limited as to what we can do with those. Right. However, non-agency products are products that we have essentially sold to the distributor, and then the distributor will add a margin to that and sell it for whatever the market will bear. But I as a manufacturer, don't control that pricing in the marketplace. The distributor does. So that's the difference between agency, non-agency. One is I control the price as the manufacturer. That's agency products. Non-agency being products that are sold from me to the distributor onto the grower. I hope that's clear as mud, but I think it lays some foundation and, like you say, some context to the conversation.
No, I think that's actually very clear, and it helps. I guess it's good for our listeners to understand the difference because there is more that you as a manufacturer can do with an agency product because you have a little bit more, influence over that price and there's more wiggle room to play around with. You mentioned the discounts, rebates, extended terms, and all of these sort of add up to some of the benefits that a grower can see with an early order program. So I guess digging into that a little bit more, when you talk to a grower, why do you think that a grower should be motivated to buy from an EOP? Because like you said, they might not be using these products for months. It's not lawn care. You're probably not applying most of these products in the winter. You're waiting till that spring crop's in production.
It's again, as you always do, a great question, because one of the things that we do as a manufacturer, and this isn't just us. I mean, this transcends to whether you're buying blue jeans or furniture or peanut butter. Manufacturers like to extend an incentive to purchase to their customers. We want to try to prompt people into buying our products.
Right.
Sometimes we do that different ways, but one of those ways is to provide buying opportunities, we like to call it. And so one of the things that we do is and really what we've done with the early order programs is that we've just conditioned the growers that when fall comes around, it's sort of that time to be thinking about buying. And so it's really wasn't really purposeful that happened. It sort of happened as a byproduct of the golf people starting with early order programs. And now they've kind of caught wind with all of these different turf and ornamental industries, and the fall for all of us. And there's probably, in the chemical business now, Bill, maybe 7, 8, 9 chemical companies that offer EOP sales incentive offerings. But the bottom line is this, and it really comes down to two things, Bill. One, savings. If I'm a grower and I want to save money and I want to get the best deal that I can get, EOP is the time to buy. I can't say it any more plainly than this, and my boss may not like it, but we're giving away free money. It's as simple as that. Saving. That's number one. Number two are the extended payment terms, and we can get into that a little later, maybe in the conversation. But extended payment terms are really, I think, a very important element of the EOP offering, and that growers may sometimes overlook. But that helps to really soften the blow, if you will, of having to buy out of season, use it, perhaps months later, but not having to pay until much later after they've had some cash flow into their operation. But and that's really the logic that I talk to growers about. It's just an opportunity to save. And it's really kind of incumbent upon the grower to do their homework with EOPs, because ultimately they're going to have to go to their CFO or their boss or their accountant or their bookkeeper and say, why in the world are you making this commitment, in September for stuff you may not be using until, late winter, early spring. And we try to help them out with that logic.
And I definitely want to get into that, the importance of extended terms, because I think that can be overlooked. But in a seasonal business like we have, cash flow is we're in a weird business. It's a lot of people don't have the stomach for it, but having these kind of extended terms, whether that's on the plant side, on the chemical side, on any product side, is super helpful with the sort of, the way that the timeline of cash flow looks in our industry. And this all makes sense to me. I can see how important EOPs can be for growers and distributors and manufacturers. I think it works for everybody throughout the chain, but I've got to believe, and when you think about it, there is going to be some risk to ordering products so far in advance, because we are growing living things in weather conditions that are unpredictable. We were just talking about it. Like this has been a good garden mom season, but in some areas of the country, it's been rough. It's been real hot. It's been rainy. We can't control that. So when you think about ordering products so far in advance in an industry that has different challenges every year, I'm sure that you work with growers on this because you have a lot of experience working with them. You've seen all of these different ranges in conditions throughout the year. So how you mentioned it early on, like EOPs can be super valuable for growers if you're making decisions correctly, if you're smart about how you make those decisions. So how do you work with growers to make that best purchasing decision and take advantage so they're not overbuying or even underbuying in some cases?
Bill, if it was easy, everybody'd be doing it, right?
Exactly. Right.
And so we work for a special group of people. You're right. They're risk takers to a certain degree. Every farmer is ultimately. One of the things that I try to help growers with, and this is a very important time of the year for me because I do a lot of planning in advance. I look at purchasing behavior, and I like to talk to especially the key growers that might have some questions or might be placing a large early order. I tell them, do your homework, be purposeful about what you're doing. You don't have to buy everything that you need for the year. Cause as you say, we're working with biology here, and biology doesn't always behave accordingly to our calendars. And so I tell growers, look at when you used product, not when you bought it. Look at when you used it and let that drive your EOP purchasing behavior. So let me expand on that just a little bit. This requires a little bit of homework, but if you think about things like insecticides, fungicides, miticides, maybe PGRs, some years you might have more disease, mite, or insect pressure. Maybe some years you have a few rainy weekends in a row and the bedding plants didn't push out as fast as you thought. You need to hold them back a little. Other years you don't have that. So how do I know where's that sweet spot? And so I tell growers to do this. Look at your purchase behavior from the previous spring and maybe buy a percentage of that for those types of products I just mentioned. Now, keep in mind that there are those things that you're applying on a preventative basis. You know you're going to use them. Maybe as a insecticide that you're going to drench with, and you're always going to use that on as a preventative product. You're going to want to buy as much of that you know you're going to use during the EOP. There's no better time to save money than for that. What we're really talking about is when you sort of get beyond that spring rush time and you get sort of into this time of the year, or maybe into the June, July, August time of the year, when you're still growing, you're still selling, but you really don't know, hey, do I have a little bit of inventory left over? Do I have a lot of inventory left over? Just don't overindulge too much on those types of products. Again, insecticides, miticides, fungicides, PGRs, because your usage can vary a little bit on those. Mm-hmm. Now, herbicides, especially pre-emergence herbicides, and now I'm speaking mostly to the nursery folks on the podcast, you need to take a look at what your use is, because that's very predictable. I know the size of the area I'm going to treat. I know the acres. Those of you that are using them in greenhouses, you know what your square footage is. I tell them, buy everything during the early order program. You're not going to get a better deal on your pre-emergence herbicides, not from Envu anyway, than you're going to get during the EOP. And so make your full commitment for your pre-emergence herbicides. But on those other chemistries, think about your use patterns, think about preventative versus not preventative, and think about, insect and disease pressure that you might be encountering, and then kind of, temper your purchases to that. So just don't go hog wild on that. The one thing you don't want to do is end up at the end of the season right about now and say, I've got a warehouse full of stuff that I bought last year that I haven't used. At this point, you've already paid for it and you're sitting on dead inventory that's sitting there on the shelf. And so we want to try to do that. And when you come knocking on my door and saying, listen, I got a bunch of stuff that you sold me from last year, and it's because I got a little aggressive, those are tough conversations. Let me just say that. But I hope that adds a little.
It does.
A little direction, I think, in terms of a grower's thinking. And we can certainly help with those decision-making processes. I have access to sales data. I can look and see some of that, but usually all I see is the purchase timing. I don't necessarily see the use timing. And I think that's up to the grower to come equipped with that kind of information.
Yeah, no, I think doing your homework, keeping good records, knowing what you use, when you use it. I like that point of, the preventative products that you're going to use year to year. Now's the time to buy those right when that EOP opens, and pre-emergence herbicides, like you said, buy it all. And you and I have done an entire podcast episode on pre-emergence herbicides and how they really do save a lot of money and reduce labor. But now, especially, you can compound that by using early order programs to save money and really see some huge benefits. So I'm going to actually put a link to that in the show notes, and we'll put this episode out right as the EOP opens, and hopefully folks can listen to that and realize the benefits they can gain from pre-emergence herbicides as they're getting ready to place their order. So let's talk a little bit about terms and how you explain these delayed payments and terms to the growers you work with, because I think, like I said earlier, this is probably an underrated benefit of EOPs.
Well, I think for growers especially, because kind of like us, we both have kind of similar cash flow issues. We do about 60% of our business in September and October. That's not unlike growers that are selling 60 to 70% of their products during just a few weeks, a few months during the spring. So in a sense, we sort of, I can relate to the issues. Delayed payment terms let me back up. Our early order program begins on September the 1st. And so we're coming up just a couple of weeks. Our extended payment terms are due on, and again, this is on our agency products. I have that flexibility, as I mentioned earlier. These are just our agency products, which in fact represent a lion's share of the products that we sell. All of our agency products receive extended payment terms during the early order program. So if you buy some of it in September, we don't ask for you to pay it until June the 5th. And so I don't know, do the math. What's that? It's about 8 or 9 months.
Yeah.
So basically what I'm providing for you as a grower is interest-free money for that length of time. And in fact, I'm actually acting as a banker because I'm actually lending you that money for no interest for that length of time. So in terms of cash flow, your banker would be, well, maybe not your banker. He probably won't be that happy that I'm being a banker, but your bookkeeper, your CFO going to be very happy with that kind of thinking. And so that's what we talk about with early order program. Listen, make the purchase now. I'm not going to ask you to pay for it until in June. If you will work with your distributor, now I can't do this, but work with your distributor to hang on to that inventory that you committed to buy, which they will do. You've essentially made a commitment to buy it, and they'll deliver it to you on an as-need basis. Wow, what a win-win deal for you as a grower. You know, I'm not going to, ask you to fill your shelves up with stuff. Let your distributor work with you on that. And then I'm not going to ask you to pay for it until June. So, we've put these elements in because we understand the business. We know what growers are up against, and this preserves your cash that you need during your busy time, which is earlier in the spring, late winter, when you have your highest labor demands, and you might have some other financial demands as well. Certainly your logistics, your trucking, delivery costs, those kinds of things. You can save your capital, your cash for that. We'll let you go deliver the plants, get paid for them, and then we'll take our payments on down the road. So I think it's a great deal. It's a win-win for everybody.
No, I think that's great. And like Steve said, talk to your distributor because a lot of times they will warehouse that product and be able to put that on a truck to you weekly. So you don't have to sit on, an entire, shelf of crop protection products. Maybe not all of them will do it, but some will. And it's definitely, it's one of those things. Doesn't hurt to ask. And you might really be happy with that outcome. Well, I really appreciate you kind of taking this high level view of EOPs just from your perspective and having dealt with them for so long. Let's talk a little bit. Let's drill down to what Envu's EOP offers. You mentioned it starts September 1. So again, we're going to have this podcast. It's going to come out right around September 1st, maybe a day or two before to get people thinking. But talk a little bit about Envu's EOP, what the timeline, what that supply network looks like for you guys.
So our early order program contains basically 4 elements for saving. This is not unlike other companies. All have their different pieces to their EOP puzzle, but these are the 4 pieces that have worked for us and for our customers. And the reason they work for us is because my portfolio is a little bit different than some of my competitors.
Right.
I might be a little heavier on pre-emergence herbicides. And so we may offer things, discounts, savings that look a little bit different than some of the other companies, but it fits our portfolio. So let me talk about those if I could. But let me start off with when I'm, you hear me talking about savings a lot. There's really 2 types of savings that can take place as a result of an EOP purchase. One is called a discount. So a discount is really when the price is discounted at the front end. In other words, when you place the order and it gets delivered, you experience that discount immediately. Rebates, on the other hand, are also savings, but they're paid out, so to speak, on the back end. After the whole EOP season is over, after you've taken and perhaps even used the products, and even after you have paid the bill that's due in June the 5th, once we receive that money, we get everybody's accounts leveled up. That's when we issue rebates. So I've got savings on the front end and savings on the back end. Okay. Discounts on the front end, rebates on the back end. Listen, everyone's experienced that. You go to a store, you pull something off the shelf and it says, it's discounted today from $2 to $1.50, and you go and scan it. When you check out, you get that discount right away, right? You experience that. That's a discount. Rebates when they have a little tear off thing at the shelf and you tear that off and you scan it, you scan that coupon, and then the manufacturer issues you a rebate, a check in the mail, so to speak. It's very similar to that whole scenario. So what we do in our program, as I mentioned, we have discounts. Those are issued on our agency products. Because as I said, we can manipulate the pricing on those. So based on the volume purchased during the EOP, the distributor will issue you an invoice or a statement that shows that discount. And so that's actually earned at the beginning. Those discounts can be as much as 15% on some products, depending on the product and the amount purchased. Rebates, which apply to a number of the other elements of our EOP and the savings that can be earned, can be on non-agency products. They can earn rebates. So we have a piece of the puzzle, an element in place for those of you that are buying across the portfolio of our agency products. So if you buy multiple agency products, we reward growers for buying across our portfolio. That comes in the form of a rebate. And then finally, at the end of the whole deal, at the end of the EOP season, and our EOP runs, as we mentioned, from September 1st through the first week of December. So there's several months involved here. We have the ability to look at all those purchases for an individual grower, roll that all up, and whatever that volume of purchase of all of the qualified products of agency and non-agency products during the EOP, we pay out another rebate for that volume. Now, I should mention here that a lot of this seems very confusing, and it can be, really challenging to get your arms around. One thing that I can assure the grower is that you will not see better savings during the course of the year than you see during the early order program from Envu. And so we put a lot of time and effort into it. And we try to make it as palatable and as enticing, if you will, as incentivized as we can. Some growers, on average, I'd say growers are probably in the 10 to 15% savings. Some of the larger purchases will exceed 20% in savings. Wow. And again, as I mentioned, all of the agency products purchased will get those payment terms. Now, the non-agency products, I can't speak to the terms because the distributor manages those prices and those payment terms.
Right.
Sometimes they offer terms, sometimes they don't. Again, I'm not speaking for or against distributors, but it's their business and their prerogative to manage pricing and terms as they see fit for their business.
No, that makes sense. So yeah,
that was a mouthful. Sorry, that was a lot.
No, it boils down to, this is the best time of year to buy. You're going to get the biggest savings. Like you said, maybe 10 to 15% on average, could be even more than that on the discount side. And then your rebates can be calculated in different ways, but definitely incentivized to buy products across a portfolio. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. So the one thing that I think we need to just mention while we're having this discussion is what benefit. So, I mean, like you said, your boss, you're giving away money. So what benefit comes back to Envu from growers ordering through EOPs? Because you're not just doing this for your health. We're all right. Businesses. We need to be profitable. And I think it's just important for growers to know that kind of, whether that's benefits in the cash coming into Envu to do more R&D. Like, I mean, you guys are a company that like your goal is to help growers. You can help growers more when you have more sales. So as a basic manufacturer, in other words, a company that identifies and develops molecules and creates products from those and sells them into the marketplace, there's a hefty expense associated to that whole process. There's regulatory issues, there's R&D issues, there's discovery, formulation, toxicology, testing that has to be done. At the state and federal level, we have to get these products approved, registered. So yeah, there's dollars that we receive from the sales of our products that are reinvested into the business. I like to tell growers, we reinvest that for you. Right. If it wasn't for these reinvestments that Syngenta makes, that BASF makes, that Envu makes, that the basic manufacturers, Corteva, if those of us aren't reinvesting dollars back into our businesses, there would be no benefit to you as a grower in terms of new products. You'd be selling the stuff that I was using back, 45 years ago in my first job working as a grower. And so I tell you, the tools that growers have today, Bill, it's been both a pleasure in my career to be a part of that, but it's just phenomenal to see the level of just the technology that's coming to the market from the chemistry side. The safety of the products, the efficacy of the products, the specificity of the products, how we can really drill in and just go after a specific pest. All of that has come through innovation that's happened with basic manufacturers.
just pure and simple. And there's a cost to it. And so, yeah, sure. I don't know if I'm really answering your question. I think
no, you are.
The ultimate benefit to us, of course, we want to sell product, but we also want to incentivize growers to buy when it makes sense for them to buy. And for, I think, our industry, the fall has turned out to be that time of the year, not only for golf course superintendents, not only for lawn care operators, but for growers as well. You know, this is a time of the year. Yes, growers, especially in the greenhouse, are doing some things, but on the nursery side, time of the year when everybody can kind of take a deep breath. They have a little bit of time to think about these things, and we do our best to try to help them to make very good decisions. So, yeah, I hope that I kind of touched around the edges of that, but yeah, it all works together ultimately.
Right, because I like to think of it as it's a partnership, right? It's a partnership when you're buying products from a company, and especially when you're choosing what companies you want to work with, you're interested in what the investment that company is going to be making back into creating more products to help you do your job better. And I think it all just works together. And I thought it was just important to have that in this conversation, because I do like to remind, certainly folks in our industry that we are a tight-knit industry. Yes, there are businesses that need to make money, but you're choosing the partners you work with, whether that's a manufacturer, a distributor, because you want it to work as a partnership. So I just thought it was important to have that sort of laid out there, that in order for Envu to make investments in R&D, you guys have a budget also, and you need to know, and the earlier the better you can budget, the more you can allocate, toward making products better. So,
well, I jokingly say this oftentimes as I'm leaving a grower: buy lots. We need the money,
right?
Because ultimately it's kind of a cyclic thing that the sales that we generate at the grower level ultimately will turn into new products. Maybe not days, not weeks, not months, but at least years down the line. There's going to be new and better stuff for them to help them to continue to be successful and more successful.
Yep, and that's definitely the goal. So lastly, before we close, is there anything we missed? Are there any additional tips and tricks for success with EOPs that you want to call out? And then definitely, where can our listeners go to find more information about Envu's early order program? Because like we said, it's about to launch.
It's that time of the year. Yeah, well, thanks, Bill. I'm a salesman, so I always like to have something else to say. Yep. I would mention one thing, and we provide growers with as much help personally as we can, but I think we have one tool that can be found online at our website, envu.com. If you go to envu.com/ornamentals, I think that's how it works. That'll land you onto our ornamentals page. Once September 1st comes, we're going to activate an online calculator for the early order program. And why is that important? Because I think this is a fantastic tool for growers to use. Our online calculator is a glorified spreadsheet. Most of the formulas and cells have been locked, except for certain cells where growers can input the quantities that they might be thinking about purchasing. So they can go through our early order program. They say, I want, 10 of this, 5 of that, 13 of these, and fill out the calculator. And what that calculator does is not only does it summarize the purchases that they're thinking about making, but it will show them the exact dollar amount that they're going to be saving with all of the different elements of the early order program. But it can also show them the percentage of savings as well. So why is that important? Yeah, it's nice to see that in black and white. Well, I can assure you that as a grower, you're going to be asked by somebody why you're making these purchases. And I think it's very helpful to sit down and say, look, I've done my homework. Here's why I'm buying this. Here's some information from last year, what I bought. This is why I'm buying a little more of this. This is why I think we could maybe cut back over here, but I think we need to add a bit more over on this side. And you can sit down and show someone in black and white, not only the logic of why you're buying something, but more importantly, the savings to the company that you're going to be delivering through the EOP. And I think if you will use that online calculator, that'll be available. We'll be broadcasting that like crazy via emails to our customer base. Our website will have that as well. I believe you can actually download a copy of it and fiddle around with it on your laptop or your desktop computer. But the bottom line is that don't forget to use the calculator. It really is a helpful tool that could be used in a multitude of ways to help the whole process go a little easier.
No, and that's awesome. And I will definitely put a link to that in the show notes and in all the promotion of this podcast, because we were smart, Steve, and we got this thing timed so that it's going to drop right when the EOP starts, which is good.
Yeah, it's like I said, Bill, it's a privilege and just a joy to be on Grower Talks and to work with you on this. It's a topic that I think growers can really benefit from, and I hope I haven't been too long-winded about it. But I'm passionate about it because I know it's just fun to save people money, and I really feel like this is something that we can bring into the marketplace that growers can really benefit from.
Well, and that's awesome. And it has been a great conversation. As always, I do appreciate your time this morning. Everything that you and the whole Envu team do for our industry, you are truly appreciated. And yeah, Steve, thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure, Bill. And we'll be talking soon.
We definitely will. I'm Bill Calkins with Tech on Demand, wishing you a fantastic season. Like we've been saying, EOPs are opening very soon. If you're listening in real time during week 33, 2026, watch for them here coming up in a couple weeks. And on behalf of Steve, the entire Envu team, and your friends at Ball Publishing, thanks for listening. Take care out there.